It is way too cold. We got a comeback, and it's a double whammy. This is the 2005 F350 that I put the valve cover gaskets on. There it is. Guess what? One of the bolts is stripped. Do not drop the tiny wrench. It's like one of those M.C. Escher paintings where it looks like it should work, but then if you think about it, it just doesn't. He says it's still leaking oil, and even worse, now it won't start. So I don't know what's going on. He called me and he couldn't get it started. So I went up to his house. Couldn't get it started. I charged the batteries, took them back. Couldn't get it started. Sprayed it with ether. It wouldn't run on ether. I just wiggled some cables, and for whatever reason it started and it drove here. But now it cranks and it won't start. I've checked the obvious things. It has fuel. It has oil. Batteries are good. It cranks over just fine. The glow plugs, I'm not sure if they're working, which we probably need them today. It's very cold. But it should at least try to start. Okay, we're going to watch this ICP pressure while I crank it. Should be, I don't know, at least 500 PSI, I would think. Yeah, 1600, that should do it. So yeah, we have fuel and we have enough pressure to fire the injectors. So I don't know what the problem is. Let's look at the tach, I guess, while we crank it. Well, there it tried to start. The tach is working. Maybe it'll go. Wouldn't that be something? Son of a biscuit. Well, that's annoying. Well, it is leaking. It appears to be the oil pan. The, what do they call that? The upper pan or the cradle or whatever, I think is also leaking a bit. That is not an easy job on these 6 liters. So the book says you got to pull the engine. Guys tell me that you can just jack it up, I guess, and get the oil pan out. I don't know if that's a job I want to do. It would appear that the front timing cover is also leaking. Yeah, it's snowing. That's not supposed to be here. Boy, it's leaking a lot. It's kind of weird. It doesn't seem to leak at all when it's running, but it definitely makes up for it when it's not running. So yeah, I think it's definitely the oil pan gasket. I don't see any oil above, so it's got this, the regular pan, and then what they call the upper pan. It's kind of a weird setup. And then above that is another thing called the bed plate, I believe. And then there's also a rear cover. So there's a lot of places that it can leak. Let's check the front cover. Yeah, I think that was a false alarm. I was spraying everything down with brake clean, and it probably just dripped some grime down. It looked like a leak, or it might be leaking a little bit, but not as bad as the oil pan. So I think we're doing an oil pan gasket. And I did some research. It appears that it can be done without pulling the engine. So we're going to give it a whirl. Okay, we're going to remove the radiator supports. Now the whole radiator should come up with the engine. It's kind of designed to do that. Okay, the oil is drained. You never want to put a drain plug in finger tight. If you're putting it in, put a wrench on it. So we got to push on the damper to raise the front of the engine. I think if we take this steering damper off, we can reach it. Hopefully. I don't know if she's coming out of there. Let's see what the Astro 498 has to say about it. A little bit of tool abuse off camera, and I got it loose. That's a little sketchy, but I think it'll work. I'm gonna pull these nuts off the engine mount. The driver's side's a little easier. You can get all of those with an impact, but passenger side, we're not so lucky. There we go. It's a little precarious, but I'm going to use this screw jack to push on a 2x4, which pushes on the front pulley, the damper. And we're going to lift the front of the engine as high as we can. You don't have to go that far, you know, that far would probably be enough to get the pan out. If you're on a 2-post lift, I strongly advise you to also block the rear. We want to lift the engine, not tip the thing off the lift. Okay, we're already going up. Not even tight. Well, there's your problem. It's a little tricky to get some of these bolts, but you can do it. I got a 1/4 inch socket with a swivel. If I could see, it would be a lot easier. All right, you get the idea. It's loose. Okay, the pan won't come all the way out because of the pickup tube. So I gotta reach up in there. Somehow. That's one. Oh, so close. Alright, you guys are in my way. There it is. Piece of cake. There's the upper oil pan. Okay, I cleaned most of the goo off the upper oil pan. pull this gasket out. So it's a standard molded rubber O-ring style gasket. Pretty standard international design. They work pretty well, it's just these engines are getting old. Looks pretty clean. So I got a new gasket. It's the blue from you know who. I'm sure Motorcraft would be better, but with the strike going on, beggars can't be choosers. I'll tell you guys a story. At my last real job, my main responsibility was figuring out how to machine cast aluminum parts like this. And I can tell you that this is not an easy part to machine or cheap. And the main reason is this groove. So it's probably, what, about 4 millimeters wide and maybe 5 or 6 millimeters deep. And that groove has to be machined all the way around. And you can only do it with a tiny little 4 millimeter end mill, which even with a high RPM spindle can only move so fast. And the biggest problem is you're going to get a burr here at the top after you cut the groove. So what we would do is make custom end mills that had a radius on the bottom and kind of a chamfer shape ground into them. But those are expensive and they don't last very long. And the other problem is the flatness. This is a big part, you know, probably 600, 700 millimeters wide, and they would want this flat within probably 0.1, maybe 0.2 millimeters, which is not going to happen because you machine one side, it curls up like this. You machine the other side and it curls back, but it doesn't always go the way you think it would. Plus you have to hold on to it so it doesn't chatter. It's very tricky. That looks good. Then when you get it all machined, you have to leak test it because cast aluminum can be porous. And leak testing a big casting like this, it can be more time consuming than machining it. Okay, same thing on the bottom side. They give you a little locating feature so you know where to start. Okay. These gaskets fit in pretty tight, so you don't have to worry about them falling out. Okay. Ready to install. Before we reinstall the upper pan, I want to check all the threads. So if there's one stripped out, now is the time to deal with it. These are tiny little bolts, and they're only supposed to be torqued to, I think, 10 foot-pounds. It's very easy to strip them out. So obviously I cleaned off the bottom of the bed plate, I think they call it. Okay. Now the oil pan with the pickup tube. I also installed a new O-ring on the pickup tube. Now the fun starts. Somehow we gotta get that pickup tube installed. If you want to put a torque wrench on that, more power to you. But I'm not. Oh God. Okay. Okay, I think I got them all all started, which is probably the hardest part. Would not suggest power tools. Even an air ratchet or a cordless ratchet's got plenty of torque to strip out these tiny little bolts. I mean, I've seen bigger oil pan bolts on a Honda Civic. She's all torqued up. Might as well set her down. That's it. I hate this aftermarket crap. I had two different 6-liter Powerstroke oil filters on the shelf, and neither one of them will work. So this one is the extra tall one where you have to replace the cap. That won't work with this aftermarket cap. This one has a big warning note with it that says that it cannot be used with the spring style center post. So that's not very helpful. Luckily, I was able to get a Motorcraft. Oh, there's still some kind of ongoing patent war with these oil filters. Okay, there we go. And we'll hook up our bypass line. Okay, let's see if it'll start. Still dripping. It appears to be coming from the rear main seal area. I don't remember it leaking there before. And it's really black, so I think we're just going to hope that that is residual oil that ran down while the pan was off. And we're going to call this project done, at least for now. I'll let him take it, and if he's still not happy with it, we can go further. I'm not above throwing a crank sensor at it. In fact, I already bought one. The problem is access. The more you work on these 6-liter Powerstrokes, the more you realize that very little about them makes any sense. It's back behind those transmission lines, kind of behind this big cable here, battery cable, sort of under the AC compressor. You can't even see it. You can't even see the wires going to it. Yeah, I guess if it screws up again, we'll go after it, but I can't fix it if it's not broken. All right, we got another crank no start condition. Check out the tach. Nothing. Keep an eye on this Fickum sync. It should go to yes. And it does not. So that's got to be a problem. Yeah, we had good ICP pressure, so it should have fired the injectors. Okay, let's watch the RPMs as we crank it. Let's try that again. 55. Yeah, I think that's a problem. I've got the scope out, and I'm tapped into the crank position sensor wires at the PCM. I can't get to it down at the sensor, so this is as good as it gets. And of course it's trying to run. Looks pretty normal. Dang it, fixed itself. Again. Well, I'm not sure what to make of this. The signal looks good. I mean, it's a pretty standard 2-wire inductive magnetoreluctance sensor signal. 135 RPMs cranking seems reasonable. I don't see a problem. However, the computer seems to have seen a problem. So we got a P2617 crank position signal output circuit open. Yeah, I hate to throw parts at it, but I think that's where we're at. This is so intermittent, I can't catch it in the act. Okay, I think I'm on the screw. Okay, I got the bolt out of it. Just barely peeking out right there. I see the problem. There's a little notch in the connector and a little rib in the sensor, and they don't line up. Somebody's been here before and they filed down the rib on the old sensor. These have the same part number. Not really sure what to make of this. Somebody's been here, obviously, and they kind of knew what they were doing, but they also kind of screwed it up. So this pigtail's been replaced, and it was done correctly. These are nice adhesive line shrink tube splices. That's exactly how I would have done it. But this is the wrong connector. It looks right, but if you compare it to the actual correct connector, there's a subtle difference. This slot is on the opposite side. And instead of obtaining the right connector, they just filed the tab off the sensor and made it work. Now that's not ideal, but I don't really see how that would cause a problem. I mean, you still have good connection. I thought maybe the polarity would be wrong. It shouldn't matter because it's an AC sensor, but they had it right. So electrically, I don't see a problem with this. I've got the correct connector. I'm going to splice it in, and then we will install a new sensor with the correct tab. Not even going to try to record that. I can barely even see it, let alone try to film it. But I am going to use this handy little tool here that a viewer sent me. Thank you, Carlos. This is a wire stripper that's 90 degrees. So you can reach down into a tight area, clip onto your wire, and strip it. Pretty cool. The pigtail and crank sensor are installed. I don't want to talk about it. Well, it works. Let's see if it looks any different. Yeah, I'd say it's about the same. I don't know, the voltage looks a little higher. To me, it looks a lot cleaner. But I don't know if that really means anything. Yeah, you can see this is where it changes. Okay, well, at least it runs. We're done. This went way further than I expected. That's it, we're done. It starts and it doesn't leak oil. How long it stays that way is anybody's guess. Thanks for watching. If anybody out there can recommend a good pair of running shoes that will actually hold up, love to hear it. They're only about 2 months old. 15 minutes.